The new golf club. Good on you. That's my kid there. There's nothing like a game of mini golf. What is it, Lex? What is it about mini golf that's so
annoying? I don't know. I like winning too much to play mini golf. There's one in Rotorua that's got bunny rabbits jumping all over the course.
Yes, it does. It does. I've been to that one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Liz says, if you love mini golf, you should go to Carlucci Land in Wellington. It's made out of junk metal. It is amazing. Very good. All right. Wonderful panel. Thank you, James Elliott, Alexia Russell. Wonderful. Thank you to Sam Hollis, my producer. I'm Wallace Chap, and I am back tomorrow at 3:45. Stay with us. Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, it's rocky, pothole and slip-ridden roads ahead for Tairawhiti and Coromandel after another whack from the weather. The price of freight is about to go up. Some fruit and veg will be in short supply and it's a bit of a dampener for the school holidays. We talked to a trucking firm and a business leader. Strap on your skis. The government's pitched in $5 million to make sure Mount Ruapehu opens this season. Health New Zealand's international recruitment drive that's failed to attract a single overseas GP. And the Prime Minister has wings, lots of them. So why has he taken a backup plane on his China trip? You can watch us live on the RNZ website and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The ski season on Mount Ruapehu will go ahead, with the government providing up to $5 million to the liquidators of Ruapehu alpine lifts. The company was put into liquidation last week after a vote on who would take over the ski fields ended in a stalemate. Last year, the government said it would provide no further financial support, but Acting Prime Minister Kamel Sepuloni says the government is stepping in now because nobody else will.
It's part of Aotearoa, it's a taonga to us, and clearly there have been challenges there, and so we need to support with regards to finding a solution.
The money will buy time for the liquidators to decide on a purchaser. The Crown has also received a third expression of interest to take over the ski operations. The government is putting a further $6 million towards food banks. It says demand for food support, particularly in communities affected by extreme weather events, is high. $6 million is being added to the Food Secure Communities program set up during the pandemic. Priority will be given to those working in high-demand regions like Auckland, Tairawhiti and Hawke's Bay. The government is defending the Defence Force sending a backup plane on the Prime Minister's trip to China. It's in the Philippines in case the main plane breaks down. The opposition says that's a waste, but Acting Prime Minister Kamel Sepuloni says it was necessary given the length of the trip and that there are 81 people in the delegation. The Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has begun the visit with a porphyry being held this afternoon in Beijing. A health immigration service established by Te Whatu Order in October hasn't recruited any overseas GPs after almost 8 months in operation. The service offers internationally trained health professionals free immigration advice, one-way airfares, temporary accommodation and moving costs. A Te Whatu Order spokesperson says they've been focused on other parts of the sector and haven't tried targeting GPs through the scheme yet. You can hear more about this on Checkpoint shortly. The closure of State Highway 2 between Opotiki and Gisborne is hampering freight. Countdown says some fruit and vegetables will be in limited supply because producers are struggling to get their stock out of Tairawhiti and Hawke's Bay. Gisborne Mayor Riet Stoltz says getting the road reopened, hopefully by Friday, is a priority.
Obviously, there is different avenues that people can take. They can go down to Hawke's Bay and up in the Taupo Road, but that adds several hours.
State Highway 35, Gisborne to Ruatoria, is due to close about now, reopening at 7:30 tomorrow morning. A court has heard police don't have enough evidence for a coroner to declare that 11-year-old Mike Beckenridge and his stepfather are likely to be dead. Coroner Marcus Elliott has been hearing closing submissions over the pair's disappearance in Southland in 2015. Police believe they died by murder-suicide when John Beckenridge drove his vehicle off a cliff near Curio Bay, but Mike's family believes they staged their deaths and escaped overseas. Family private investigator Mark Templeman told the court the police evidence is incomplete. He has successfully argued for an independent review of parts of the investigation. And a Taranaki trucking company says dashcam footage capturing a litany of near misses shows what its drivers see every day. Motorists overtake on blind corners, ignore double yellow lines and park in the middle of a state highway. New Plymouth transport company Simons Group shot most of the video. Ivan Chappell is Health and Safety Manager.
The footage is shocking, no doubt, but it's not surprising either, unfortunately. It's pretty rife out there.
Be Safe Taranaki and Road Safe Taranaki have put the footage on YouTube. To sport now, and the New Zealand women's basketball side have opened their Asia Cup campaign with an upset 66-64 win over South Korea in Sydney. Ranked 29th in the world, New Zealand kept the 12th ranked Koreans at bay from the tip-off, leading 20-12 after the first quarter. New Zealand's dominance was helped by strong defensive rebounding as Korea struggled to get their shots to drop. The Tall Ferns play world number 2 China tomorrow night. A top 4 finish at the 8-team tournament will move them close to qualifying for next year's Paris Olympics. The Crusaders' chief executive, Colin Mansbridge, says a statue immortalising club legends Sam Whitelock and Richie Mo'unga is not out of the question. The pair and coach Scott Robertson celebrated their final game with the team at the weekend. Mansbridge says Christchurch's new stadium, due to be completed in 2026, could be the ideal opportunity to erect a permanent tribute. And the White Ferns are enjoying the conditions in Sri Lanka as they prepare for the opening match of their 6-game tour. The first one-dayer is tomorrow afternoon in what is the first White Ferns visit to Sri Lanka for a bilateral series. Batter Maddie Green says they're in a confident frame of mind.
We've talked about recovery over here being really critical, so we're training hard and trying to recover as well as we can. So I think, it's hot and we're sweating, so trying to stay on top of that hydration is absolutely crucial over here. But I think the girls are coping pretty well and we've had a great couple of days.
That's the news.
A conference spotlight on Christopher Luxon.
We're coming off the back of highly charismatic leaders like Ardern and Key, and that's always a hard act to follow.
All I hear is negative comments about our leader. He is not negative at all.
Cleaning up in Tairawhiti.
Just slips and slumps. Every drop of rain that falls is another bit of weight on that soil up on the hill.
And chaos at the Kremlin.
Putin's furious. He talked about a stab in the back, a betrayal. Remember that Prigozhin was his Frankenstein's monster that he created.
Keeping it current, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. In the west, from Northland to Wellington, including Coromandel, Taumarunui and Taihape, also waded upper. Showers becoming widespread for a time this afternoon and evening north of Whanganui, from some heavy with thunderstorms possible, especially along the west coast. For the Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers turning to rain this evening, possibly heavy and thundery, clearing overnight, occasional showers tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and from Buller to Fiordland, rain with heavy, possibly thundery falls, easing to isolated showers this evening, clearing early tomorrow, scattered rain in the north from tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, scattered rain clearing this evening, fine tomorrow morning, rain spreading south from the afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, cloudy with some patchy rain today, fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog tomorrow. And for Ruapehu, Chatham Islands, the odd light shower. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Damaged highways are stopping produce getting to market and forcing at least one freight company to add a surcharge to account for the major detours they have to take. State Highway 2 between Gisborne and Matariki will be closed until at least the end of the week because of a dropout from more wild weather. Countdown has already told customers to be prepared for shortages of some vegetables. Further north in the Coromandel, another lifeline highway is out of action because of persistent slips. With the school holidays around the corner, they're already counting their losses. Crystal Gibbons has more.
Moving produce from A to B just got a whole lot harder. The closure of State Highway 2 between Opotiki and Gisborne has hampered freight deliveries, including fresh vegetables. Gisborne Mayor Rahet Stoltz says getting the road reopened is a priority.
Obviously, there is different avenues that people can take. They can go down to Hawke's Bay and up in the Taupo Road, but that adds several hours to travel and several costs to businesses.
This afternoon, supermarket giant Countdown has told customers some fruit and vegetables will be in limited supply because producers are struggling to get their stock out of Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. One of those vegetable suppliers is Liquidator. Chief Executive Richard Burke says there shouldn't be any shortages at supermarkets because all crops are also grown in other regions. But getting fresh produce out of Tairawhiti has been a logistical nightmare.
Well, we're going south at the moment, and south is still open. Obviously, there's quite a bit of risk, just north of Hawke's Bay through the Devil's Elbow and across the Portorino Bridge, which is a Bailey Bridge. So we're a little bit nervous about that.
Richard Burke says a more resilient road is needed north of Gisborne. Further north, on the Coromandel, there are yet more road woes for a region hammered by the weather this year. State Highway 25 up the Thames coast has been closed and may have to stay closed for the rest of the day. Anchor Lodge in Coromandel Town is again counting its losses, as continual rain and road closures put tourists off visiting. Manager Sue Gill Devereaux says they haven't received a single booking for the upcoming long weekend.
Normally Matariki weekend, which is coming up in July, normally now we would be quite full for that weekend.
Thames Coromandel Mayor Len Salt says it's been a tough time for Coromandel businesses with the main road, State Highway 25A, out of action. But he says they are working on improving the wider roading network.
So while State Highway 25A, that bridge is being built, we're going to be doing work with Wakakotahi to get attention on the rest of that roading stretch from Kopu to Hikawai, so that we can get some really good long-term resilience built back into those roading networks.
Two regions feeling the brunt of the weather and exposing how vulnerable they are to it.
Crystal Gibbons reporting there, and Waka Kotahi says State Highway 25 up the Thames coast will remain closed overnight. It says contractors are making good progress to clear the slip, but geotech engineers say it is not safe to reopen just yet. The government has defended taking a backup plane part of the way for the Prime Minister's trip to China. Chris Hipkins has arrived in Beijing for a jam-packed week of talks, including with President Xi Jinping. He and his contingent travelled on an Air Force 757 and stopped to refuel in Cairns and Manila. A second plane followed the first for the refuelling stops and will now head back to Cairns. Our political editor Jane Patterson is in Beijing and joins us now. So Jane, what's the Prime Minister had to say about the backup plane?
Yes, Lisa, the plane or planes once again playing a starring role in one of these prime ministerial trips. Now look, as we know, there have been several instances where the Defence Force planes have broken down on trips, on trade missions with the Prime Minister, and often too with the business and media delegation causing a lot of political embarrassment and inconvenience. So there is a practice that often, if it's further afield, that there will be a second plane. So this isn't unique, but in this instance it was very visible because it landed next to the main plane in Cairns and then again in Manila. But it has gone back to be stationed in Cairns to stay in Australia, to stay regional, so that if anything does happen, then that is there. Now look, ACT and National have really laid into this, saying it's a waste of money, and also taking 2 planes up in terms of emissions in the middle of a climate change crisis is also irresponsible. ACT has released figures showing that since June 2022 to May 2023 there were 49 aviation safety events, and the running tally is about $33 million for maintenance and repairs for these 757s since mid-22. But look, the government says they've been advised that they are still okay for a while. They're not actually due to be replaced until 2028, 2030. They're defending it, saying that the importance of the trade mission, the large delegation, the success of the mission, it was justified in this use in this case.
So Jane, aside from the planes, what's been happening there today?
So Chris Hipkins, his first day here, we are at the embassy where he had a formal welcome and pōwhiri this morning. He said, described it as a day of admin, getting ready for some high-level political meetings over the next couple of days. The big one, President Xi Jinping, Tuesday night here in Beijing, New Zealand time. And of course there are a number of gnarly and sensitive issues. The New Zealand government's described this trip as a reconnecting, rebuilding or shoring up that relationship after years of COVID where those face-to-face meetings weren't possible. So obviously a range of issues on the table, including human rights, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, regional security concerns, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and of course the war in Ukraine, where New Zealand wants China to try to use its influence with Russia and President Putin to bring an end to that conflict.
And also, what are some of the gnarly issues that Chris Hipkins is going to have to manage?
They really are the internal affairs, and that's how China sees them. So in terms of concerns about the treatment of the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they see those and describe them as internal affairs. Now, I spoke to the Chinese ambassador to Wellington, Wang Xiaolong, before I left, and he said there is room within the relationship to have discussion about these really crunchy, difficult issues. But he said there are limits. He said they will not tolerate interference in China's internal affairs. So there will be, I'm sure, some robust conversations. Basically, the leaders across the table, they make opening statements laying out the framework or the parameters of the discussions, and then they get into the talks, and that's really where the substantive exchanges come. So of course New Zealand's often been criticised as going soft on China, as opposed to, for example, its Five Eyes partner for trade, because China is such an important economic partner for New Zealand. Chris Hipkins says he will raise those issues, but I imagine as a foreign affairs rookie too, he'll be taking the temperature. He's going to have to step carefully. This is a huge diplomatic, high-stakes meeting for Chris Hipkins, as well as those other top-level meetings. So a big learning curve for him. All signs are pretty positive in terms of the general relationship, but a lot at stake during this week.
Thanks for the update, Jane. That's our political editor, Jane Patterson, joining us live from Beijing. It is 5:15. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The ski season on Mount Ruapehu has been saved, with the government providing up to $5 million to the liquidators of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts. The company was put into liquidation last week after a vote on who would take over the ski fields ended in a stalemate. The money will buy time for the liquidators to decide on the purchaser of the land and its assets. Last year, the government said it would provide no further financial support. But Acting Prime Minister Carmel Sepuloni says the government is stepping in now because nobody else will.
It's not a situation anyone wants to be in. We wish that they hadn't gone into liquidation, that we weren't in a position where we needed to support, but we need to, and people still want to be able to access this taonga, and we understand that. It's an interim solution, and so we certainly want some more certainty and to find a solution for the future, but in the interim we are providing some financial support.
A significant factor behind the struggles of Ruapehu alpine lifts was consecutive seasons of poor weather. Carmel Sepuloni says there will be questions around the use of the mountain in the future.
If you've been up, not in the middle of winter, but if you've been up when there's no snow, it's still a beautiful place to go and visit. And so I think everyone that's in that situation is probably rethinking where they pivot to and how they work with regards to the tourism sector and access to our taonga.
The Crown has also received a further expression of interest from Matariki Tatumu Te Hiuhiu on behalf of Tū Wharetoa to take over the ski operations on the mountain. This is in addition to the expressions of interest received from Whakapapa Holdings and Pure Turoa. We'll talk to the Liquidator John Fisk shortly. An immigration service set up by Health New Zealand in October still hasn't recruited any overseas-based GPs, almost 8 months later. Te Whatu Ora's International Recruitment Centre aims to make it as easy as possible for the international health professionals to move to Aotearoa. But while no internationally trained GPs are touching down on New Zealand soil, some GPs trained here say the recruitment exercise is a waste of time anyway. Tom Taylor reports.
Getting in to see the doctor can take up to 6 weeks depending where you are in the country. And with many general practices not taking new enrolments, there's no guarantee of getting an appointment at all. Chair of the General Practice Owners Association, Angus Chambers, says it's a sign our healthcare system is unhealthy.
I've never seen access to primary care as bad as it is now. Very large number of clinics have got their books closed. Many people are waiting weeks and weeks to see their GPs.
A recent GenPro survey showed only 45% of the country's clinics were taking on new patients. Mr Chambers' own clinic in Christchurch has just closed its books again. He says general practices are understaffed and unsustainable. As part of a solution, Te Whatu Ora launched an immigration drive last year, offering one-way airfares, temporary accommodation and moving costs to internationally trained health professionals. But so far, no GPs have arrived. A spokesperson told Checkpoint it's not that they've been unsuccessful, they've been focusing on other parts of the health sector and haven't tried targeting GPs through the scheme yet. Mr Chambers says he's not surprised.
The bureaucracy is incredibly inefficient. There's people who are paid far more than GPs littering those organisations, and they think they know best. But they don't. They don't understand. They might say stuff, but they don't translate any of that stuff into genuine support.
ProCare Chief Executive Bindi Norwell says her Auckland Healthcare Collective has attempted its own international recruitment drives.
We have been successful with some roles, but, it is quite competitive out there.
She says immigration settings need to be improved to make the move smoother for GPs.
It can be quite quick sometimes if they really already thought about a move to a new country, particularly New Zealand. You make it easier for them. We help them with their immigration papers. We help with their transition over to the country. And that can be a very, very smooth process. But others might take a little bit more time to do that. They may have children in schools and things to factor in as well. So it really does depend on the situation.
GP at Mount Eden 575 Doctors Jodie O'Sullivan says without better pay on offer, Te Whatu Ora's overseas recruitment efforts may be futile.
UK's worse than us. So if they're going to Australia where they're paid a lot of money for primary care. They're not coming to New Zealand. Why would you come to somewhere where you're being paid considerably less with poorer working conditions and a system under the pump?
She says overseas trained doctors can't be expected to hit the ground running, with cultural considerations and knowledge of te tiriti having a big bearing on patients' health outcomes. Dr O'Sullivan says if Te Whatu Ora wants to boost the workforce, they're putting their energy in the wrong place.
Recruitment is not necessarily the answer. The answer is retaining general practitioners, making it something that New Zealand doctors want to do when they graduate from medicine, and helping with training GPs.
Te Whatu Ora Chief People Officer Andrew Slater says 98 people have been employed across the health workforce through international recruitment campaigns so far, and a targeted campaign for GPs is due to start later this month.
Tom Taylor with that report. It's 20 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. If roads are causing problems for your business or whānau after the bad weather on the weekend, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And also, what do you think about the government kicking in another $5 million to keep the Ruapehu ski fields open this season? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for us to go to the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
The government says it's stepping in with $5 million to save the ski season on Mount Ruapehu because there was no other option. Acting Prime Minister Kamel Sepuloni says the money will allow the liquidators of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts the time to find a new buyer or buyers. The company was put into liquidation last week after a vote on who would take over the ski fields ended in a stalemate. A Tairawhiti trucking company says it has no option but to introduce a surcharge to cover the cost of disrupted road trips and one-way freight deliveries due to severe flood damage in the region. State Highway 2 is closed north of Gisborne while there are speed restrictions and traffic management on the road from Napier. That means significant detours for freight until at least Friday. The government has announced it's putting a further $6 million towards food banks through the Food Secure Communities program. It says demand from the food banks, particularly in communities affected by extreme weather, is high. Priority will be given to food banks in Tairawhiti, Hawke's Bay and Auckland. And a transport company says it's not unusual for a truck driver to have to leave the profession after witnessing an horrific crash. Simons Group was speaking out after dashcam footage emerged, capturing a litany of near misses involving Taranaki drivers overtaking its trucks on blind corners and ignoring double yellow lines. Be Safe Taranaki and Road Safe Taranaki posted the footage on YouTube. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, the following roads are closed. State Highway 2, Gisborne to Opotiki, and Gisborne to Ruatoria, State Highway 35, closed at 5 p.m. and will reopen at around 7 tomorrow morning after checks on the road. Our next traffic news and headlines are at about 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā e ho. The man in the middle of the Super Rugby final on Saturday night has detailed the abuse he's received since the game. Ben O'Keefe was the referee for the Crusaders' win over the Chiefs in Hamilton and woke the next morning to abuse from unhappy Chiefs fans. Well, joining me now is sports reporter Jonty Dine. Jonty, what's Ben O'Keefe had to say about the situation?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, as you can imagine, O'Keefe's pretty disappointed by this backlash. I mean, he was not only booed on the field, but walking off the field, and as you mentioned, fans have flooded his social media and left abusive messages, which, I mean, is pretty pathetic behaviour from fans. I mean, he didn't have the best game of his life, no, but he certainly doesn't deserve this sort of treatment. Referees, as you know, are human, just like the players. They make mistakes, and that's just all part of sport. And blaming a team's loss on a referee just it comes across as pretty bitter, and it's just pretty poor form from New Zealand fans. Some of the messages that they've left include calling him a grub, cheat, a muppet, saying that the mobs are coming for you, accusing him of being paid off, and others that I can't read on air, Lisa. So some pretty nasty stuff. Ben has responded. He's posted to Instagram saying that as a referee at the highest level, he has unfortunately become accustomed to this sort of treatment and vitriol that has become normalised almost by the fans. He said it's a sad reality, but it just doesn't affect him anymore, though he does worry about the direction that some of the fans are going, saying that Saturday was an example of fans really crossing the line. So a pretty pragmatic response from Ben, but really no one should be subjected to that sort of abuse, particularly someone who is giving their life to the game we all love.
OK, let's move on to cricket. And Kane Williamson, Black Caps captain, he's rehabbing at the moment. So what's the latest?
Well, he is hopeful of a possible return in time for the World Cup, and I imagine plenty of Black Caps fans are as well. He suffered a pretty serious ACL tear in the IPL, as we know, back in April, and it seemed to all but rule him out for the World Cup. But he's been quietly rehabilitating at home ever since. We're still about 4 months away from the Cricket World Cup, so he does still have time, and he's just not prepared to say that he's not going to make the field. And as he said today, his rehab is tracking nicely.
Talking to a number of people that have experience with these, with my physio, with other sports people as well, there's quite clear data in terms of the process and returning back to sport, which to have a focus and see some of those steps and tick some of those off is actually keeps you quite motivated. So it has been quite nice to do that over the last 3 months and see some of that progress.
Of course, we know how crucial he would be to the Black Caps campaign, and while it is a long shot, there is an outside possibility he may even make the back end of the tournament, being that it runs for about 6 weeks. So he's just chipping away at the gym, at the nets in Mount Maunganui at home, spending time with the family, and just he's taking things week by week. Obviously, we would love to see him out there on the field in India come October, so we'll keep our fingers crossed for him, Lisa.
Thanks, Jonty. Sports reporter Jonty Dine there. The government's stumping up $5 million to make sure the Ruapehu ski season goes ahead. Last week, operator Ruapehu Alpine Lifts was forced into liquidation after its creditors rejected a government-backed plan that would have seen 2 separate operators running one side of the mountain each for a purchase price of $1. The government says the mountain is worth $100 million a year to the region's economy, and it's always been committed to ensuring the ski season goes ahead. It has also revealed a third group is now vying to run the mountain ski operation. Well, joining us now is PwC Liquidator John Fisk. Kia ora, John.
Good evening, Lisa.
So, what's the money for? What's the parameters for the $5 million?
Well, it's a standby facility that enables us to operate for the full season and to have skiing and snowboarding on both the Whakapapa and Turawa sides of the mountain. So it's great news in terms of being able to give some certainty to employees and to the community and businesses in the area.
So, John, when you call it a standby facility, what do you mean? Is it a loan? Is it a revolving credit account? What is it?
Yeah, it's a type of loan, and we'll be able to draw that down fairly quickly if we need to. But the season, and generally in winter, the season trades on a cash flow positive basis. A lot of the costs are incurred over the summer period, which we've already incurred those costs for this year.
So kind of loan, is there interest on it? Do you have to give the whole $5 million back? Does whoever buys the company take responsibility for that? Can you be specific?
I'm waiting for our lawyers to go through the documentation that is being prepared at the moment, so I haven't actually got all the information to hand yet. That'll all become clearer in the next 24 hours.
But you've accepted it, so it's full steam ahead for a ski season?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
That's right. So we'll be meeting with management in the morning to talk through some of the logistics that we'll need to work through.
John, I know it's early days, given you're still going over the documents for the money, so when potentially could a ski season start then on Ruapehu?
Oh, well, it's due to start at the beginning of July, and subject to weather, that will remain the case. So
you will make that date?
I believe so, yeah. So the management tell me that they've got the staffing and all those sorts of things being lined up. There's something like 200 people starting this week with training, and those numbers will continue to grow as we go into the season. So what we can do is now give everyone confidence that there will be a season, and we're looking forward to welcoming people on the mountain in the near future.
What can you tell us about the new bidder that's entered the race and what their offer is?
I haven't seen any details of that yet. Again, that's something that needs to be worked through, and I'm sure we'll understand a bit more over the coming weeks on that.
So, okay, it is a group representing the iwi Tūwhare Tour, right? So the licence to operate on the mountain is held by who? Which iwi?
Well, no, it's held by DOC. So Department of Conservation grants the concession to operate on the mountain. The Department of Conservation has an obligation to consult with iwi if there's going to be any change to that concession, including the transfer to any other party. So they're still working through that process. And what this standby facility enables us to do is to continue to operate the business whilst that consultation process is completed.
Yes, and on that consultation process, is that consulting with Tūwhare Tour or is it consulting with the group of iwi?
Again, I'm not particularly party to who actually is being spoken to in regard to each of the iwi, but that's the process that DOC is working through.
So the $5 million, how much time does that buy you in terms of making a decision on what happens next?
Well, as I said, the business actually should trade reasonably cash flow positive through this season. But what this does is provides an underwrite, as it were, to give us confidence that if we do have a season like 2022 again, then we will be able to ensure that all creditors that we incur as the liquidators do get paid on time in accordance with their terms.
So you have no drop-dead date for making a decision about which of these three proposals you'll potentially go forward with?
That's right. So what we do have the confidence of is that we will be able to trade for the 2023 winter season, and then that obviously gives time for this process to be completed, and then deal with bidders and try and get the best outcome possible for creditors.
So, John, a decision could be months and months away then? Potentially.
Look, I can't control that process, but it could be, and we'll just have to continue to operate the mountain if that happens. But the good news is that we've got funding to be able to give us confidence to do that.
And to be clear, is it you as the liquidator that makes the final decision on what to do? Because obviously the creditors jettisoned the proposals last week. The company's now forced into liquidation. So is it on your shoulders what happens next? Entirely the liquidator's decision?
Yes, so Richard Nacy and myself, as the appointed liquidators, now have the obligation to get the best outcome for the creditors. It's not a voting process like it was under a voluntary administration. So the process is probably a bit more straightforward this time.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That is John Fisk, who is the PwC liquidator in respect of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts. And they're saying the ski season will go ahead as planned in July. Now the government has provided $5 million as a standby facility, as he described it. 26 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Giles Beckford, who joins us live from Wellington. Okay, Giles, what is Kiwi Bank hearing from businesses in terms of what they're worried about now?
Well, they're saying that their trips are on the road and they're talking to businesses all around the country. It's changed from last year. Now, last year it was all about trying to find skilled labour. It was the rising cost of doing business. Inflation was the big bugbear for them as well. That's changed coming into 2023. The issue now is, can they earn enough money to keep going? The worry is that consumer demand and the economy generally slowing, so that's putting pressure on them for revenue. Some of them are actually finding their costs are falling as inflation comes away. They're also being left with, some of them, a reasonable amount of stock. Remembering in the past year or so, supply chain disruptions, businesses bought ahead. They figured that might as well buy an extra packet or 3 dozen now, in case they couldn't get some in a couple of months' time. And it would seem that some of them are being left with that on their shelves. It's not selling. So interesting change of mood amongst businesses. The other thing that is starting to just loom a little bit in their headlights is the forthcoming election. Awareness about both parties, actually, the two main parties. It would seem, as the Kiwi Bank economists hear it and recount it, that people are not too actually impressed by either side. In particular, they're also looking for some real clear signals on things like taxation and regulations. All in all, the mood is summed up as not an economy that's in recession. And we should note that although we were very quick to go technical recession after those recent numbers, if it hadn't been for the teachers' strike and bad weather, we would have probably recorded a small positive growth period. So we could be out of it even now as we speak. But essentially, people are saying, the economy is bumping along the bottom. We're crawling sideways. And that sort of matches what's happening in other parts of the world. And certainly there's a growing concern about the strength of China's recovery, or lack of it. And given that they're our biggest trading partner, imports and exports, if it hurts, or if they're hurting, then you have to worry about the prospects of some sectors of our economy as well. But it's not a negative report. It's just one that says attitudes have changed. Their concerns looking ahead are also changing.
Giles, this next one is a bit of a minefield. You say the young ones, and I'm assuming it's not the ancient television program, are getting the financial message. Could you be specific? Who are the young ones, and what message are they or aren't they getting?
Let's remember, the young ones on TV, of course, never had two brass roos to rub together, apart from buying a packet of lentils. Now, this is Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know what your pronunciation preference is, 18 to 24-year-olds, born just before the millennium, and, they're the young earners, shall we say now, leaving education, coming into work. And the past couple of years, the mantra's been beaten. The young ones don't understand. They're not saving. They're not responsible. They don't have an attitude about looking at investment. Well, this research that's been done by ANZ Investments, a KiwiSaver provider, I grant you, suggests that they're actually not been doing too bad. They've been picking up some of those need to be financially savvy, educated, and thinking about your long-term future. So 1 in 4 of them in the past year increased their KiwiSaver contributions. They were more likely to switch providers than older people. And of course, that's been one of the messages that's been out there. If you're getting poor returns or you're being charged too much, don't sit around and take it. Look for somebody who's doing better. It would seem that Gen Z is. They've been making voluntary contributions. In other words, they get a little bit extra. They tuck it into their KiwiSaver account, and they're doing that on a broader basis than older demographics. The only issue is really they have a wariness about investing, but for all of that, a sizable number think that when there's a downturn, it's a good time to actually invest. Now, that might well be the sharesies mentality, the sharesies way of doing things that's helping to change attitudes. All in all, it says that we should have some confidence that the younger ones who old folks like me cast an eye on about their profligate ways, right, they're actually doing pretty good and they're looking after themselves.
Giles, can we have a quick spin around the markets, please?
Not a good day for the share market. We just can't buy a win at the moment. Down 99 points. That's about 0.8%, just under 11,700. For the New Zealand dollar, it's a little bit firmer, but not much. 61.7 US cents and 92.2 Australian.
Thank you, Giles. Ka kite. Giles Beckford there with our business news. The situation in Russia is still tense tonight following an attempted rebellion at the weekend by Wagner mercenary forces. Their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has accepted exile in Belarus, and there's evidence that his units have stood down. It's the biggest challenge to the authority of Vladimir Putin in more than 20 years. CNN's Matthew Chance says there's relief in Moscow, but anxiety about what this unprecedented challenge to the power of President Putin's authority might unleash.
On the streets of a major Russian city, Rostov-on-Don in the south, residents cheered Wagner fighters as they withdrew. Many Russians see them as heroes, not as the traitors the Kremlin paints them. And Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has become a celebrity too. Watch his supporters hail down his car just to shake hands. The Kremlin says he's now moving to Belarus next door, but it's unclear if this is the last we'll see of him. What is definite, though, is a sense of relief, at least here in the Russian capital. It's calm now, but in the mayhem of the weekend, Moscow was on high alert. Military checkpoints on the outskirts of the city residents bracing for Wagner fighters to enter and for the confrontation that never came. It was really uneasy yesterday, says Andre. But look now, people are walking in the streets and it's all good. Let's hope it'll stay peaceful, he adds. But even here, there's sympathy for Prigozhin's unprecedented challenge. His tirades against the conduct of the war in Ukraine appears to have struck a popular chord. I think it was an expression of an opinion, says Oleg, another resident of Moscow. An opinion of a powerful person who wants some justice and clarity. The belief Prigozhin should be listened to is widely shared here. But that's not what the Kremlin wants to hear. Vladimir Putin hasn't appeared in public since making his angry pledge on Saturday, filmed behind the scenes by state television, to punish those responsible for what he called an armed mutiny, the biggest challenge to his authority in 23 years of power. But now that challenge has been made, there are growing concerns about what a defensive President Putin, stung by the events of this weekend, will do next to stay in power.
It is 12 minutes away from 6 and you're at Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, do keep your feedback coming. Love to hear your thoughts on the $5 million the government is injecting into the Ruapehu ski fields so that this winter season can go ahead. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
The Liquidator for Ruapehu Alpine Lifts says it's great news that the government is stumping up $5 million to make sure the Ruapehu ski season goes ahead. The company was forced into liquidation last week after its creditors rejected a government-backed plan. PwC liquidator John Fisk told Checkpoint the money is a type of loan that it will draw on as necessary. The government says the mountain is worth $100 million a year to the region's economy. The acting Prime Minister is defending the government sending a backup plane on the Prime Minister's trip to China. It was sent in case the main plane breaks down. The opposition says that's a waste, but Carmel Sepuloni says it was necessary given the length of the trip. She says there's a large delegation of business leaders on the trip as well. The head of a GP owners group says access to primary healthcare is as bad as he's seen it. Angus Chambers of the General Practice Owners Association made the comment in light of a Te Whatu Ora Health Immigration Service not having recruited any overseas GPs after almost 8 months in operation. He says people are waiting weeks to see their GPs while many clinics have their books closed. And a Taranaki road safety organisation says posting footage of shocking behaviour on the region's roads is designed to show drivers what the ramifications of their actions are. Lois Eggers of Be Safe Taranaki and Road Safe Taranaki says the footage is a wake-up call. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 35 is closed from Okitu to Ruatoria and will reopen after checks at around 7 in the morning. And north of Gisborne, State Highway 2, Matawai to Te Karaka is also closed. In Nelson, State Highway 6, surface flooding between Quarantine and Saxton roads has closed the southbound left lane. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
No mihi, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback now. One question. Someone said, asking about the fruit and veg that Countdown says could be in short supply. The specifics of the veg and the fruit that they've identified, they say it's bagged salads, lettuce, broccoli and mandarins, and that's because of transport issues around Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. On the government providing $5 million to Ruapehu Alpine Lifts, the liquidators there to open this season. This person says sports like skiing and sailing are playgrounds for the well-off. If the government can fund those, they can fund Victoria University, their deficit too, to retain language teaching. Someone else says, what a waste of money throwing $5 million so people can go skiing. It would have been better spent donating to Kids Can to help cold and hungry children, says Dave from Waikanai. And this one in a similar vein, they say, I'd rather the $5 million get spent on our roads than ski bunnies. When is our government going to realise that people can't drive to the mountain, let alone ski on it? Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A private investigator believes police did not investigate the disappearance of Mike Zhao Beckenridge and his stepfather, John Beckenridge, thoroughly enough. The pair disappeared in March 2015 and a coronial hearing is trying to establish whether they're alive or dead. Our Christchurch reporter Adam Burns was in court.
In closing submissions, the police's lawyer Deirdre Elsmore argued both Mike and John Beckenridge died by murder-suicide by driving off the cliff in the Catlins.
It's important in this context to consider John Beckenridge's personality, his relative dysfunction prior to the change in custody, and the clear change in his personality that was witnessed by a number of witnesses.
Mike Beckenridge was just 11 years old at the time. The car was found at the bottom of a cliff in the Catlins. 2 months later, their bodies have never been found. Ms Elsmore referred to police conclusions that recovering bodies from the coastline is generally difficult.
Beckenridge planned to ensure that it landed in the sea. He planned to ensure that bodies would not be found. There's no mystery, and I think this is a question mark in relation to this matter as to why were they not found, but that isn't a mystery based on the evidence.
But Mike Beckenridge's family believe there are unanswered questions and that the pair are still alive. The family's private investigator, Mark Templeman, says police evidence on the vehicle crash is incomplete. Ms Elsmore proposed an independent review be completed.
My only caveat would be to ensure, firstly, that the review is focused on the parts of the evidence which the family are most concerned about, and secondly, that any review is subject to some sort of conference between the experts, Senior Constable Patterson and the independent expert.
A woman who claims she spotted the pair while holidaying in Indonesia back in 2015 provided evidence earlier in the hearing. Police believe the evidence remains unreliable. Mr Templeman says it is dangerous to conclude that the pair are deceased.
I submit that this investigation remain open as sightings are still being received and have not been investigated by the police inquiry team. In closing, Fiona Blue believes that Mike is still alive and expects that he will return to her once he is no longer under the influence of John Beckenridge.
Coroner Marcus Elliott is expected to reserve his decision to a later date.
It's 11 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Whānau in cyclone-devastated areas are now turning their attention towards Matariki in a move to help the community reflect on the past and look forward to the future. Marae and community leaders are hoping to raise the wairua of Whānau in Hawke's Bay and Tairawhiti by coming together and celebrating the Māori New Year. Ashley McCall with this report. Yeah, haere nei, no power, no water, no way out. New Zealand is under a state of emergency. In Napier, tens of people are on their roofs facing rising floodwater.
It's been a taumaha or heavy time for East Coast whānau, but the rise of Matariki is hoped to bring brighter days. Waimarama Marae, nestled on the east coast of Hawke's Bay, will celebrate their first hautapu on July 14th, with a ceremony at dawn with around 400 people expected to attend. A hautapu is an ancient Māori tradition of feeding the star cluster through steam produced by cooked kai. Along with a massive hakere, there will also be karakia and waiata booming. This is how the marae sounded at a Waitangi Day concert. Ngāti Kahungunu iwi chair, Baden Barber, says he's looking forward to it after a rough year.
I think it's going to be really important. It's about the healing process. It's about bringing our whānau together. It's about having a good time. It's about fun. It's about food. It's about whakapapa, about connection.
A suitable whetū he will reflect on is Pohutakawa, the star that represents those who have passed on.
It's about acknowledging what happened and those that passed on. We've got a big job ahead of us as Karanunu Hawke's Bay, Greater Hawke's Bay people to work our way through the rebuild.
Meanwhile in Wairoa, the town is still in recovery mode after being devastated by Cyclone Gabrielle. Hiwa i te rangi is the star in the cluster that represents our wishes and aspirations for the future, which is what whānau in Wairoa will be thinking about this Matariki.
We get back to a place that everyone has a home. Everyone is kind of back to their normal, not having to worry about the silt under their house.
Kai whakahaere he Oranga Potama, Esther Wainohu, is organising a whole week of Matariki activities. It includes a whānau concert on Friday where she's expecting around 1,000 people to go along. The town's playground will also illuminate with 1,000 lanterns, and whānau are invited to write stories to attach onto the lights. She hopes this year's celebration will lift the wairoa of whānau.
There are still people that are displaced. There are still people that are still struggling to get, the silt and that from out of their houses. So what we're wanting to do is give them a space where they can come and just be amongst the community. We want to give them somewhere where they can come and feel the happy vibes, positive vibes. And it's in time and need that they come together.
Further up the coast in Tokomaru Bay, this year's theme is Matariki Kaina Hokia, meaning Matariki calls you home. Hapu member Te Aorere Pewhairangi explains it's a time for whānau and remembering our role as kaitiaki.
It's not just to spend time with our whānau, but to go home and give back what you can to those spaces. Matariki Kaina Hokia is a bit of a challenge to us to remember our responsibilities to our whānau in the places we call home.
Pa Kiri Kiri Marae is having a moko papa where a few hapu members will get their moko kauai along with umu kohu kohu or hangi. These stars include tupua nuku, food grown in the ground, tupua rangi, kai linked to the sky, waita representing the ocean, and waiti connected to fresh water. The one that sticks out the most to the marae is Matariki, which represents well-being and health. But Te Aorere says the cluster as a whole is important.
I think we have to consider all 9 stars as Māori, the health of not only people but the land is holistic, so we don't put one above the other. We have to consider all of them to create a balanced whole.
Te Aorere's wero or challenge for everyone is to come together and work out solutions on how to move forward, something Te Tairawhiti and Te Matua Maui are in desperate need of.
A 9-strong team of blossoming mixed martial athletes are set to take on the world in Las Vegas next month. But the diminutive but dangerous young grapplers from Auckland will compete at a competition which will feature some of the best BJJ artists in the world. Jonty Dine has the story.
At this West Auckland dojo, young jiu-jitsu athletes are getting ready to take on the world.
I like competing. I like doing the competitions and lots of running. I'm going to be a jiu-jitsu champion.
I'm going to go into a black belt and maybe even to a red belt.
Boston, Isaac, Noah, Caden, Miller, Ariane, Mila, Tyus and Nico want to be the next generation of New Zealand combat sports stars. Ranging in age from 7 to 16, the team will compete at Jiu-Jitsu Con 2023 in Las Vegas, which will feature some of the top BJJ athletes in the world. Combat Centre owner Sally Hemehema opened her doors 5 years ago and has seen a steady stream of kids since.
There was about 190 kids doing jiu-jitsu. There's no striking, so jiu-jitsu is more about it's grappling. There's no kicking and punching. It's about submissions and holds, so it really does favour the little guy.
The littlest of the lot is 7-year-old Mila Dwyer, who will represent Samoa while in Vegas, which she says is a proud moment for her whānau.
Especially for my family. Some of them live in Samoa.
Climb the hands high, bring the heel to the head, post for base, bring our leg over, sit.
Mila was bullied at school before finding strength and confidence through BJJ. There is also the element of discipline, with many parents noticing a distinct shift in their children. Noah Green says the sport also trains them to be good people.
This is very disciplined. You have to have a good attitude. You have to listen. It's very disciplined. I wouldn't use jiu-jitsu in a fight as well outside of the gym.
Taking a team of 9 kids with parents and support staff is a tall financial feat.
We had to raise about $60,000. What we've been working towards as a team. So we've been running fundraisers all over the show, glow discos, holiday programs, car washes, bake sales, open mats.
However, Sally says they want to ensure cost is no barrier for the kids.
Often we get referrals from people about, we've got this kid, he can't afford it, but man, he needs it. And we'll be like, right, bring him in, it's fine. And so lots of raw talent and need some structure and discipline to round off the game. And also to fight. We've got a lot of kids that want to fight.
Head coach Adam Halliday is training kids from the age of 4, and his students quickly develop belief in themselves. He says his students will hold their own in Las Vegas.
I think they'll do really well. I think that it's like definitely a level up from anything they'll have experienced here or even in Australia. Because you go over to America, all of a sudden the kids are very serious.
The team still need about $10,000 in order to get to Las Vegas, but based on their work ethic, you wouldn't bet against them raising it. As Nico says, this will be just the start.
Well, go Vegas, and then after that just keep doing competitions, because I haven't got a full rack here. I just set my medals out, and the thing that I used to set it out is getting really full and heavy.
This is a group of kids you wouldn't want to pick on at the playground.
If you were watching, or listening rather, to that one, you can watch the video. You see Jonty Dine tapping out after he's absolutely crushed by, well, a relatively young-looking person. We'll put it on our webpage. You can check out the video. You got lots of thoughts on the Ruapehu ski field and the government kicking in another $5 million so they can open this season. This person says, oh my goodness, why on earth are the New Zealand public, aka the government, paying out Ruapehu ski field? For goodness sake, a ski field. There are people with nothing to eat. There is a climate crisis. Another says, great news about Ruapehu. Economically, it's so important to the region, and the government would be left with a $100 million clean-up bill for the mountain if skiing ends on the Monga. Someone else says the government is stepping in at Ruapehu to save hundreds of jobs and businesses, and the decision this year will impact the future of Ohawakuni, possibly for generations to come. $5 million isn't a lot considering the wider impact. On the other hand, Catherine says she's shocked that the government is stumping up $5 million for skiers and only $6 million for food banks. Surely $11 million for food banks would have been a better investment, reckons Catherine. The mountain belongs to nature, says Peggy from Kapiti. We as humans have no rights or claim on it at all. Waste of money, says another person, the $5 million for skiing. They'll be lucky if there is any snow given the current weather. North Island ski fields a bad investment given global warming. That from Jane, and Jane's not alone. Quite a few of you got in touch about the weather, saying, well, is there actually even going to be a ski season? Susan in Auckland says, just listening to the people saying that the $5 million could be better spent, the money's not going to wealthy skiers, is it? Isn't it going to keep the ski fields running so that people who live in the area will have an income over the winter? Another person says overseas ski fields survive via their investment in accommodation and support services. That was the trouble for RAL. This is a perfect chance for us, the government, in partnership with iwi, to take over the whole operation. We already have a classic operation on one side. Why let someone else take the profits? And this one in on the abuse to the referee in the Chiefs Crusaders game. The reaction by Chiefs supporters to the referee is ridiculous and shocking, they say. Only the referee can gauge the tone of the game by being in amongst it, and they need to make difficult calls. The referee made a rather lenient judgment on the Chiefs tackle. That should have been a red card early in the game, which would have had a huge effect. Overall, though, the ref did a good job.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. A liquidator in charge of deciding what happens to Ruapehu's 2 ski fields says it could be months before a decision is made. The government's putting in $5 million to make sure this year's ski season goes ahead. 3 parties are vying to run the mountain ski operation after former operator Ruapehu Alpine Lifts was forced into liquidation last week. PwC liquidator John Fisk told Checkpoint it could be months before the successful bid is announced because there's no set date to decide.
I can't control that process, but it could be, and we'll just have to continue to operate the mountain if that happens. But the good news is that we've got funding to be able to give us confidence to do that.
John Fisk says 200 staff have started training this week and more are expected to join after the season begins in July. The Prime Minister is defending the Defence Force's decision to bring a backup plane on his trip to China. An extra plane has travelled to Philippines in case the main aircraft breaks down, as it has done on numerous occasions. The government plans to replace the 757 aircraft between 2028 and 2030. Chris Hipkins says sending a backup plane isn't standard practice.
That's not done in every instance. In this particular instance, that was a decision taken by the Air Force to have some contingency built into the planning around the trip.
Opposition parties have ridiculed the government for sending a backup plane, calling it embarrassing and inappropriate. The government is putting a further $6 million towards food banks. It says demand for food support, particularly in communities affected by extreme weather, is high. Coromandel's State Highway 25 will remain closed overnight between Ruapehu and Waiomu. The road was expected to reopen this afternoon, but Wakakotahi says geotech engineers have advised it's not safe. The transport agency says the rock face is unstable and there's still potential for more material to fall. Today's slip is in the same location as another slip which was cleared the day before. Meanwhile, the closure of State Highway 2 between Opotiki and Gisborne is hampering freight. Countdown says some fruit and vegetables will be in limited supply because producers are struggling to get their stock out of Tairawhiti and Hawke's Bay. State Highway 35, Gisborne to Ruatoria, is closed overnight and is due to reopen at about 7 tomorrow morning. A bath toy shark has been recalled after multiple reports of it injuring young children overseas. The US Consumer Product Safety Commission has recalled 7.5 million of the baby shark bath toys after 12 children fell or sat on the hard plastic fin and 9 of them needed stitches. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment has now recalled the toys here. The bath toy, which swims and sings, is made by Zuru Toys, which was founded by New Zealand brothers Nick and Matt Mowbray. And anyone who has the toys can get in touch with the company online for a refund. The Health and Disability Watchdog has found 2 doctors breached the Consumer Rights Code in their care of a 4-year-old girl who was later hospitalised with diabetes. The doctors overlooked her abnormal urine results at 2 separate appointments in November 2020. The girl was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes by another doctor later that month and spent 5 days in hospital. Deputy Health and Disability Commissioner Vanessa Caldwell has asked both doctors to apologise. She's also made recommendations to the company that owns the clinics. A health immigration service established by Te Whatu Order in October hasn't recruited any overseas GPs after almost 8 months in operation. The service offers internationally trained health professionals free immigration advice, one-way airfares, temporary accommodation and moving costs. A Te Whatu Order spokesperson says they've been focused on other parts of the sector and haven't tried targeting GPs through the scheme yet. The chairperson of the General Practice Owners Association, Angus Chambers, says the workforce is under the pump.
I've never seen access to primary care as bad as it is now. Very large number of clinics have got their books closed. Many people are waiting weeks and weeks to see their GPs.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken to US President Joe Biden about the short-lived mutiny by Wagner mercenaries in Russia. He says they also discussed US military support for Ukraine.
We discussed the hostilities on the front line and our active efforts. The support provided by our partners is very significant and really helps our soldiers move forward. Now the Russian occupiers are suffering losses which we need them to. We also discussed further strengthening of Ukrainian troops.
WorkSafe is looking into how a person suffered serious injuries in a toxic chemical spill near Dunedin. Emergency services were called to an industrial park on the outskirts of Mosgiel shortly after midday. Fire and Emergency says hydrogen sulfide spilled from a truck. The compound is toxic to humans as well as corrosive and flammable. And a transport company says it's not unusual for a truck driver to have to leave the profession after witnessing an horrific crash. Simon's Group was speaking out after dashcam footage emerged, capturing a litany of near misses involving Taranaki drivers overtaking its trucks on blind corners and ignoring double yellow lines. Most of it was captured from the cabs of the company's trucks. Health and Safety Manager Ivan Chappell says the consequences for truckies when things go wrong are huge.
The trauma that it puts the drivers through is horrendous. If they see somebody that's involved in something serious and they, seriously injured or they lose their life, that sits with the drivers forever.
Be Safe Taranaki and Road Safe Taranaki posted the footage on YouTube. That's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, Porirua City Council's been fined again for a foul smell emanating from Tawa's landfill. Residents have had enough. Moves to stop third parties being allowed to buy your name and address from the electoral roll. Bob Kerr's graphic novel draws on his father's war experience to bring history to a new generation. And one man's crazy idea to build backcountry huts out of water tanks now forms a trail of ski huts from Coronet Peak to Treble Cone. With me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. In the west, from Northland to Wellington, including Coromandel, Taumarunui and Taihape, also Waded Upper. Showers becoming widespread for a time this afternoon and evening north of Whanganui. Some heavy with thunderstorms possible, especially along the west coast. For the Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers turning to rain this evening, possibly heavy and thundery, clearing overnight. Tomorrow, occasional showers. Marlborough, Nelson and from Buller to Fiordland. Rain with heavy, possibly thundery falls, easing to isolated showers this evening, clearing early tomorrow. Scattered rain in the north from tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, scattered rain clearing this evening. Fine tomorrow morning, rain spreading south from the afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, cloudy with some patchy rain today. Fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog tomorrow. And for Chatham Islands, the odd light shower. It's 8 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Coromandel businesses are facing another massive bump in the road, or rather a slip that Waka Kotahi is working overtime to clear from State Highway 25. It's blocking lanes in both directions at Ruapehu, meaning motorists have to take the long way around the peninsula via the Karangahake Gorge to get in and out of Whitianga and Coromandel town. Waka Kotahi says contractors are clearing away around 360 cubic metres of material, and abseilers are being used to bring down debris from the cliff above. The road will remain closed overnight. Now, that is in addition to State Highway 25A being closed indefinitely. And with the school holidays starting at the end of the week, the latest damage means more uncertainty for already hard-hit businesses. Linda Grant is chair of the Mercury Bay Business Association and joins us now. Linda, this must sound like a broken record. You must be over it.
We are actually, and as I sit here now, I can hear the rain outside again. Hard to believe, really.
So how are businesses coping?
I think the situation, is having a really severe impact on our businesses. Our community depends on visitor numbers for their livelihood. So this, of course, has a trickle-down effect throughout our community's economy and well-being. With school holidays upon us, we would like to see some visitors.
Yeah, and with the road closed at the moment, how much longer does it take, people driving to get to you in Coromandel Town or Whitianga, for example?
It's probably sort of maybe another hour from Auckland if you're coming through Paeroa and Whangamata. It's a pretty scenic route and the roads are really great. So, I think, we obviously have State Highway 25A has been out and will be out for some considerable time. But, the scenic routes are pretty amazing. And I think, what we've seen is that the roads are an obstacle for visitors to get here, and our absentee ratepayers are not making that effort. But it's actually just adding another sort of 45 minutes, an hour on to your journey. So it's very doable.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a hurdle in people's head, is it?
I think it's a hurdle in people's head, and not our overseas visitors. They look at Google and it's 3 hours to get here. That's fine. I think it's the people that are used to coming down here in a couple of hours. Our people from Auckland and Waikato and beyond, who currently shy away from making the journey just to the collective fear of getting stuck here.
So 2 separate groups we're talking about here, Linda. Let's start with the absentee ratepayers. Are you seeing them not visit as frequently as they would?
Yes, when I talk to businesses, winter is a quieter time for us. So during the week, businesses are, it's not down too much. However, we're severely down on that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And they're our visitors from Auckland, Waikato that come for a weekend, and they're our batch owners and our people that just come down for a weekend. We are still seeing our international visitors, but when I talk to tourist operators, they're arriving. But it is that big group of absentee ratepayers and weekend visitors that we're not seeing.
So you said you're open for business. Come along. It's a scenic drive. It's just a little bit longer. But with school holidays starting at the end of this week, do you know what kind of bookings people are seeing, and how worried are they that people will just think, too hard basket?
I think they are really concerned, actually. The ones that we've had some stunning weather, so we have had, people coming, and people have been able to get out in the water. But with school holidays, we are hoping to see those people arriving. We're hoping to see some batch owners back down here. Rather than coming for 2 or 3 days, come for 4 or 5 days. I think that's what we're hoping that we will see.
And so in terms of the road, because Waka Kotahi says, well, there's quite a bit of dirt to get rid of and there's still instability in the cliff. They've sent some abseilers over the side to kind of get the rest of the loose material off there. It could be a couple more days. We don't know.
It could be a couple of more days. They're pretty amazing, some of these workers, how quickly they get it cleared. We've seen that. And I think what it is that we just people need to check the roading status and see that it is clear. And once it's clear, it's good to go. I travel that road quite frequently, and, on the whole, it's a great road.
Linda, I think you've earned yourself a quick plug. So on your marks, let's get your message out there for people with the school holidays approaching.
So holidays, come and visit Mercury Bay. In actual fact, the Business Association have a great night market on. We've got a great night fun run that we're organising. So there is events, and I think you'll really enjoy your time in Mercury Bay.
Thank you, Linda. Really appreciate your time and best of luck. That is Linda Grant. She's the chair of the Mercury Bay Business Association. Coromandel open for visitors. She says it's a scenic route. Just take you a little bit longer, but don't stay away. They need you. It is 14 minutes after 6 and you're a checkpoint on RNZ National. A woman whose husband and son both perished on the Titan submersible in the North Atlantic has spoken of her loss. The sub was on its way to view the wreck of the Titanic when it suffered a catastrophic explosion. Christine Darwood, mother of 19-year-old Suleiman and wife of 48-year-old Shahzadeh, has spoken exclusively to the BBC's. Nomia Iqbal with the story.
We lost comm. I think that would be a sentence I would never want to hear in my life again. Lost comm, as in we lost communication.
Were you aboard the vessel? Were you here?
Yes, I was on board the vessel. I was on the ship. I think I lost hope when we passed the 96 hours mark. That's when I lost hope. And that's when I even then sent a message to my family on shore. I said, I'm preparing for the worst. That's when I lost hope. But my daughter, for example, she didn't lose hope until the call with the Coast Guard, when they basically informed us that they found debris.
Tell me just some memories that you have of your boy.
So he would not go anywhere without his Rubik's Cube. So he used to teach himself through YouTube how to solve the Rubik's Cube, and he was really fast at it. I think his best was 12 seconds or something like that.
What were your last moments or words that you shared with your husband and son? Do you remember that?
Well, we just hugged and joked, actually, because Shahzada was so excited to go down. He was like a little child.
Was that a lifelong dream of his to do?
Yes, absolutely. He had this ability of childlike excitement. So they both were so excited.
And how did Mum feel about it, or were you excited as well?
I was really happy for them because both of them, they really, really wanted to do that for a very long time. So it was supposed to be Shahzada and I going down. But then I stepped back and gave the space to Suleiman because he really wanted to go.
This, again, seems like a really difficult question to ask, but how do you begin to get closure? If that's even possible.
Is there such a thing? I don't know. I think he started so many amazing projects. He was involved in so many, he helped so many people, and I think Aline and I really want to continue that legacy.
Is there anything else you want to add, Christine?
That I missed him. That I really, really missed him. Yeah.
And there are a number of agencies investigating the Titan tragedy, including the US Coast Guard and the FBI. Moscow still has special security measures in force following the dramatic 24-hour rebellion by Russia's Wagner mercenary group. The group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, instructed his troops to march on the capital to seek changes in Russia's military command. As events unfolded inside Russia, political leaders around the world wondered out loud what the implications might be from this unprecedented threat to Vladimir Putin. President Putin hasn't been seen since Saturday. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg reports.
Leaving as heroes. The Wagner fighters pulling out of Rostov last night. You'd think they'd just won a war. The leader of the mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was off too. He'd just done a deal with the Kremlin to end their mutiny. The rebellion started here, then spread north. It was the biggest challenge to Vladimir Putin's authority since he came to power.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
Russia's commander-in-chief likes to project an image of strength. A mutiny on his watch is embarrassing. But is it damaging? For Vladimir Putin, will there be political fallout ahead of next year's election?
He definitely looks weaker. All elite groups will begin to think about the presidency 2024. Should they rely, as they did even 1 week before this military coup, on Vladimir Putin? Or should they think about someone new?
But there's no sign yet that someone new in the Kremlin is Mr. Putin's plan.
Vladimir Putin is determined to show that he is in charge, in control in the Kremlin. And he has the Russian state media to help him paint that picture. The trouble is, the dramatic events of the last couple of days have raised questions about how in control the Russian authorities are of the situation here.
Instability. Russians can feel it. The rebel Wagner fighters may not have made it to Moscow, but people here were watching nervously and waiting.
I'm
a mother with 3 children, Anna tells me. Of course I'm terrified by what has happened. We were scared these events would spread to Moscow, Nastya says. There's nothing ordinary citizens can do to influence the situation. It's decided above our heads. Many Russians tell me that. They don't believe they have the power to change what is happening in their country, to make their voices heard, to turn things around.
To Sweden now, where an investigation is underway into the derailment of a roller coaster at a theme park in Stockholm. One person died and 9 others were injured in the incident. Police say children are among those being treated in hospital, with 3 in a serious condition. Here's the BBC's Orlando Teal.
The 140-year-old theme park was teeming with families on a sunny Sunday morning, shortly before midday, when the accident happened. Eyewitnesses say a carriage from the Jetline roller coaster, which is 30 metres high and travels up to 90 kilometres an hour, broke away from the tracks. This man described what he saw.
At first I heard only a bang, then I turned around. I saw the roller coaster and bang, it backs up. At first I thought it was meant to be that way, but then I saw 2 guys flying out of the carriage. One guy kind of grabbed a pole and just hung there. His face was bleeding. The other guy flew down. He just flew down. That's what I saw.
Ambulances, fire trucks and a rescue helicopter were seen arriving at the park, which was evacuated and has been closed for at least a week. Police say 9 people are being treated in hospital, including several children, and an investigation is underway. A spokeswoman for Grüner Lund said 14 people were on the roller coaster when the front part partially derailed. She promised everything would be done to get to the bottom of what had happened and said their thoughts went out to all those affected.
Greek authorities are facing more allegations about failing to help people on board a sinking migrant boat. It's thought hundreds lost their lives. There are 104 survivors. The BBC has heard evidence from some of those who say the Greek Coast Guard sailed away when the heavily overcrowded vessel was clearly in trouble. The BBC's Khalid Karamid has the story.
At least 82 people died when this vessel sank, with fears up to 500 more people perished. In Athens, I spoke to Hasiba Rahman via video call. He says that the boat that eventually rescued people moved away from him in the water.
I was in the water for an hour. I swam to the ship as it was far away. They had to put a speedboat and were rescuing, but had gone far away.
On hearing the news of the boat sinking, many Pakistanis from around Europe travelled to Greece. Many said they had relatives on board. They came here with pictures and details of their loved ones, hoping someone might be able to give them a lead. He says the agent has taken 2.5 million rupees and isn't answering calls now. The boy's mother is really worried, and so is the father. The boy is only 15. For many of the families, their struggle ends here. The only hope they have left is to submit their DNA to the Greek authorities. If the DNAs match with the bodies recovered, they may get some closure. Otherwise, their struggles continue. The Greek authorities have ended the search operation, and little hope is left for the recovery of further bodies. But the survivors' testimonies continue to cast doubt on the version of events presented by Greek authorities. And there's now calls for an independent inquiry.
A group of India's top wrestlers say they have ended their street protest demanding action against the chief of the country's wrestling federation for alleged sexual harassment. Earlier this month, Delhi police filed charges of sexual misconduct against Brij Bhushan Singh, who denies the charges. The BBC's Anbarasan Ethirajan reports.
One of India's prominent female athletes, Sakshi Malik, an Olympic medal winner, said from now on their battle against Mr. Singh would continue in court. The athletes said the government had fulfilled its promise of filing charges against Mr. Singh, who is an influential MP from the governing Hindu nationalist BJP. If convicted, he faces up to 3 years in jail. He rejects the sexual misconduct charges. The wrestlers began a sit-in protest in Delhi demanding the arrest of Mr. Singh in April and were briefly detained. Their protest became known as the Indian sports' Me Too movement. Images of the athletes being dragged away and carried in buses sparked widespread criticism. The wrestlers originally hit the street in January, but they called off their protest after the government promised to look into their complaints. The agitation was resumed in April, alleging the lack of action against Mr. Singh. The wrestlers at one point had also threatened to throw their medals into the Ganges, regarded India's holiest river, before agreeing to meet ministers. Ms. Malik earlier this month told the BBC that they were hurt that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had not yet commented on their allegations.
Sir Elton John says he will never take the stage in the UK again after headlining the final day of the Glastonbury Festival over the weekend. The singer-songwriter described the performance as the perfect way to end his touring career. The BBC's Katie Razzle was at the festival in Somerset.
Spectacular from the very start, and opening with a song he hadn't performed live in 10 years.
It's what the weekend has been building towards. Elton John on the Pyramid stage for the final UK date of this farewell tour. The crowds are stretching way into the distance, and people further in have been here since this morning.
It was all about claiming a spot near the front and paying tribute to a performer with a love of flamboyant outfits, a rocket man who, before tonight, had never performed at Glastonbury. The crowds grew through the day, wowed first by Sophie Ellis-Bextor, then later Blondie and Lil Nas X. And guessing games went on to fill the long hours. What song would Elton John kick off with? And what special guests would he bring on? One of them was Jacob Lusk from Gabriel's, a band championed by Elton. Backstage earlier, it was clear the feeling is mutual.
He wears the most incredible outfits. His voice is bigger than life. The way that he tickles those keys with his fingers is like none I've ever seen live, ever. And I think there's something about his music that speaks to the soul.
Elton's other guests included The Killer's Brandon Flowers. But tonight was less about those surprises and more about one man and his incredible back catalogue.
How are you enjoying the music?
I think he's wonderful, and God love him. He's one of the old ones, and us old ones rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, it rocks.
I mean, I've always loved all of his songs. I love that you can just like blast out, sing along, and it's just iconic, isn't it? It's like so special to be here.
It might be the last time we ever see him performing live.
You're going to make me cry. I can't even believe I'm here watching him at Glastonbury. Mwah.
Elton delivered hit after hit, and a grand finale that took us from a farm in Somerset right up into space.
Well, there you have it. He says last concert on UK soil. Before we go, some more of your reckons on the potential veggie shortage. Joan's got in touch to say, instead of the packaged salad greens, bok choy raw is a delicious alternative to salad ingredients. She says it's crunchy and slightly peppery. Thanks for the heads up, Joan. In Ruapehu, this listener says 5 million is not enough. RAL supports the livelihoods of 2 large towns and an entire region. Yeah, mixed bag on that one, because someone else has got in touch to say, I have been stuck in a 45-minute, 3-kilometre long roadworks issue near Rotorua. If a ski company cannot make a profit, it should fail, especially if we have got third-world conditions that stop a whole lane on a highway for 45 minutes. This is meant to be like this until September. Sort it out. Sounds like you'd rather the 5 million went on roadworks. Someone, though, believes it's great news about the government supporting Ruapehu Ski. The mountain and its citizens and tourist activities is vital to the centre of the North Island and the economy there. Others of you keep raising concerns about climate change and whether there actually will be a ski season. But that is all we have got time for. The Late News team is going to keep you updated throughout the evening. If you missed anything on the program, you can check us out again on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, Brown Butterbean Food Bank boss Dave Latelli joins first up to talk about the government's $6 million boost for food banks and the demand he is seeing in the community. Yep, 6 million for food banks, 5 for Mount Ruapehu. Tune in for that discussion, 5 a.m. tomorrow morning.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. The liquidator of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts says government funding of $5 million has given it confidence the ski fields will open next month. The Prime Minister is defending taking a backup plane on the visit to China, saying the decision was made by the Air Force to provide contingency options and it's not usual practice. A major supermarket chain is warning that rain and road closures will affect the supply of fruit and vegetables for the next week. And Te Whatu Ora says its focus has been on other areas and not an immigration service set up to recruit overseas GPs, despite clinics crying out for more staff. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
After 1pm on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, become just a teeny bit better than you were last year, and then repeat that every year. Founding editor of Wired magazine, Kevin Kelly, doesn't just offer that advice, he also offers a way to achieve it. When he turned 68, he started writing down life lessons that he's found useful for his kids. The result is a book of 450 modern proverbs for a pretty good life. He'll share some of his favourites with us when he joins me on Afternoons from 1pm on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Kia ora, you're with me, Evie Ashton, through till 7 o'clock. Right now, on the detail, not all gangs are the same, and different perceptions of who they are and why they're there has resulted in some very different ways of handling situations. Alexia Russell with today's episode of The Detail.
Today on The Detail, a tale of two gang towns. One where meth-dealing intruders were swiftly dispatched.
The Timaru District Council today confirmed it has bought a property long used as a gang pad and immediately demolished the building.
And another where the patched are still whānau, who will be extended the hand of friendship no matter what the outside narrative is.
I've been for a drive this afternoon down the road to where the majority of the mongrel mob are congregating, and it's a very family-orientated feel. I mean, there's a lot of gang members there in patches, don't get me wrong, but they're respectfully mourning for one of their own that's passed.
Kia ora, I'm Alexia Russell. Opotiki in the North Island, Timaru in the South. Opotiki, where, when I asked how the town was dealing with gangs, I was told in no uncertain terms I was asking the wrong question.
That's completely the wrong narrative. The kupu is, how do we support our gang whānau within towns, within cities? Because their dealing kōrero sounds very persecutive, very condemning.
And Timaru, where crowds gathered and cheered as diggers ripped into the rebels' HQ.
Oh yeah, look, there was about 100 odd people on the day, and they were loving it. And look, the amount of texts and emails and responses we've had from the community, and the joke is, you know, how can local government move so fast? And it was nice to be able to do something, really positive for our community.
That's Mayor Nigel Bowen, and we'll come back to his story soon. But as he says,
I think it's a model that can work elsewhere, but it won't suit every situation.
And Opotiki is the town that's hit the news most recently, sparking dramatic headlines, opportunistic politicians, and biting commentary.
Police in Opotiki say they're in control despite gang tensions in the Bay of Plenty town becoming political. Numerous gang members are there for the funeral of mongrel mob leader Stephen Tairawhiti. He was killed on Friday night and police are still hunting those responsible.
We've had up to 50 extra staff in Matariki the last few days, and tomorrow that's ramping up to 100.
It is utterly unacceptable. A town is shut down in New Zealand because a gang came to town. Unacceptable.
We've seen time and time again gang members taking over public spaces, public roads, abusing members of the public, assaulting members of the public.
The old Opotiki Mayor David Moore, he's sick of reporters. Reporters were the ones who just did all those pictures you saw of the gangs, the smoke, the gunshots, the arrests, the closed highways. That was a figment of your imagination. That was on the media. They got that completely wrong. It's become a political football, he says, old David Moore.
Yes, well, Mayor David Moore wouldn't speak to me either for this podcast. As Mike Hosking says, he's sick of reporters. But the council works closely with local iwi Te Whakatohea. And Trust Board member Tekahotu Maxwell was happy to kōrero about whakapapa, manakitanga, and working with the Opotiki District Council. And yes, those things are gang-related.
Since the death of Tiwana, our nephew, we've been working very closely with we form what we call the Runanga Nui. And all members of our community have a position on this unconstituted body that was needed because of urgency and safety. So the council, the mayor's been sitting on this Runanga Nui since the Sunday after Tiwana was killed. And so has the police, and so has experts and clinicians and technicians within our community with regard to mental health, with regard to providing social services to the old. We've had the Ministry of Education and principals sitting on this runanga because we all have skin in the game.
You're trying to all be on the same page when it comes to dealing with issues.
Well, we are not trying to, we are.
Mm.
We are all on the same page because we have, as I said, we have an invested interest in our town remaining standing up and not being burnt to the ground, and our people that live here not becoming corpses in a cemetery. So, and the mayor is also whakatoe who's Māori, so he has real skin in the game.
Joining our conversation was Wata Heathcote, who works with gangs across the wider region. He's a navigator, a mediator. His work is about keeping whānau safe.
When you're talking about whānau connected to the gang space, I actually take it one step back from there, and what actually connects us is whakapapa. What connects us is whānau first and foremost before they lead down that track of becoming a gang member. But I suppose what we've actually got to realise in terms of what we're facing, all they're wanting, our whānau, is to have a sense of belonging to something. And what's coming across in the media and political sector is a view from the outside, not actually understanding what's going on in the inside. And so I'm pretty clear when it comes to whānau in this particular space, we must give them that opportunity to also be the voice for who they are within their communities in a pro-social and equal way.
So rather than sort of condemnation from on high, acknowledging them as part of the community.
Absolutely. That's actually what they want to be a part of.
And how does this go hand in hand with, you don't earn a patch by helping old ladies across the road? How does that go hand in hand with some of the more unsavoury aspects that gangs are renowned for?
Yeah, again, when we talk unsavoury, that depends on perspective and assumption. The nefarious acts that happen within that particular space, it's very, very easy to tarnish those that are within the gangs with the same brush. But I'm telling you, as a person that works with these people across multiple sector, is that they are not all the same. What I will share is that 80% of our whānau are looking for change. They're looking for somewhere to reach out to for help. The 20% that continue to sit on the hill or continue to sit in the darkness will come, to the attention of the authorities. And that's exactly what needs to happen. What I'm saying is that there are actually 80% that are looking for change, that are reaching out for help. We've got that opportunity to do that collectively.
While remaining within the setting of their gang families, because they as you said, they need that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. Sense of belonging. Their sense of belonging might look different to the normal Joe Blog in the community in terms of sense of belonging. But what we need to understand and what society needs to understand is that these people have been deprived. and continue to be deprived.
The Mayor's understanding of that situation and his refusal to act the outraged civic leader was a trigger for politicians and commentators.
The person that's deceased is one of our locals, so there's whānau that are grieving. They don't know who's done this, so they're obviously a little bit angry and hoping that police sort of come, find out who's done this and resolve it as quick as possible. So there is some heightened concern in the community. There is a gang aspect to